Hello everyone, this side Dr. Abhijit, and today we are going to discuss about the CVS embryology. The very first topic that I will be discussing in CVS embryology, it is the development of the heart, in which I will be discussing about the heart tube and its derivatives. So let's start. Now, development of the heart. The very first thing that you have to remember over here, that is the origin. So remember that the origin of the heart, it is basically developing from the splanchnopleurotic mesoderm, right? So remember that it develops from the splanchnopleurotic mesoderm. Splanchnopleurotic mesoderm. Now, we already know that we have three layers, right? The ectoderm, endoderm and the mesoderm. So let us draw and understand. Now let us suppose this is the ectoderm, right? This is the ectoderm, and yes, this is the ectoderm, and let us suppose this is the endoderm that I am drawing. This is the endoderm, yes. Now, you already know that there are 2 points over here where ectoderm and endoderm are meeting, and there is no mesoderm in between, right? There is no mesoderm in between. So you already know, let us just mark this. This is the ectoderm, right? This is the endoderm, and in between we have this mesoderm, right? We have the mesoderm. So let me just write it over here. Yeah, this is the mesoderm. Now, there will be two places where this mesoderm will be absent. So yeah, this particular place where the ectoderm and the endoderm, they both are fusing, it is called as the buccopharyngeal membrane. Okay, buccopharyngeal membrane, right? You already know why the mesoderm is absent over here, because this membrane has to rupture, right? It will lead to the opening of the mouth, and that's why the mesoderm is absent over here. If mesoderm is absent, so the rupture would not be that easy. So yeah, this is something which will further lead to the opening of the mouth. You already know this. Opening of the mouth, right? And this opening over here, this is called, this will lead to, yeah, this is the cloacal membrane, and it will lead to the opening of the anal or the anal canal, right? Opening of anal canal. So this area which I am highlighting right now, it is the mesoderm, right? This is the mesoderm. So yes, this is the mesoderm. At 2 points this mesoderm will be absent. I have already told you the reason why it is absent at these 2 points. This is the site of the buccopharyngeal and the cloacal membrane, and later it will be present like this, right? Later on it will be like present like this only. So yes. So you already know towards the buccopharyngeal membrane, right? Buccopharyngeal membrane is towards the procaudal plate, and I have already told you that the procaudal plate, it is the one which decides the cranial end of the embryo, right? It decides the cranial end of the embryo or the head end of the embryo. The head end of the embryo, whereas yeah, the other end will be the caudal end or the tail end of the embryo. The tail end of the embryo. Now you already know we have three types of the mesoderm that is there, right? In between You already know we have the neural tube, right? So let me just draw it for you. You already know we have this neural tube. I am writing it as NT. We have the neural crest cells, and below the neural tube we have this notochord, right? This is the notochord, right? And this is the neural crest cells. Neural crest cells. So you can just write it over here. NT stands for the neural tube, and NCC stands for the neural crest cells. Neural crest cells. Now, no, at the sides of this neural tube, we have, yes, we have the mesoderm, and this mesoderm, it is called as, repeating the last line again, repeating the last line again, repeat. Now, at the sides of the neural tube, you will get one mesoderm over here, that is called as the, yes, this is called as the paraaxial mesoderm, because it is just near the midline, just near to this axial plane, on the sides of the axial plane. So it is called as the paraaxial mesoderm. Paraaxial mesoderm. Just on the sides we have another mesoderm that leads to the form of the repeat, that leads to the formation of the urogenital system. And yes, this mesoderm, it is called as the intermediate mesoderm. Intermediate mesoderm, right? And yeah, the mesoderm on the lateral side, the mesoderm on the lateral side will be termed as the lateral plate mesoderm. So over here we will have this lateral plate mesoderm. So yes, this is the lateral plate mesoderm. Now, this lateral plate mesoderm has, yeah, in the lateral plate mesoderm, some area of this mesoderm, okay, it is not differentiated, okay, it is not differentiated. Now, this lateral plate mesoderm will have, like, say I am dividing this into two areas over here. One area will give rise to this heart, okay, so we specifically call this heart, okay, so specifically we call this developing part, okay, that is called as the cardiogenic area, okay, it is called as the cardiogenic area, okay, it is called as the cardiogenic area where the future heart will develop. And just lateral to it we have, yes, we have undifferentiated lateral plate mesoderm, lateral plate mesoderm. And yes, undifferentiated lateral plate mesoderm towards the cranial end. I'm just talking about this cranial end right now. So towards the cranial end, it will, yes, it is called as the septum transversum. So yes, it is called as septum transversum. Septum transversum, right? So remember the origin, it is developing from the splanchnopleurotic mesoderm. So this mesoderm, it is the lateral plate mesoderm only. Okay, I will be coming to the terms somato and splanchnopleurotic. So what structures are coming from somato and what structures are coming from splanchnopleurotic? So remember, most of the heart, it is coming from this splanchnopleurotic mesoderm only. So yes, let's take this into account and now discuss about the external form of the heart. So yes, the first thing that we are going to discuss, it is the external form of the heart. Now, the very first structure, it is called as the primordium of the heart. primordium of the heart. Now, when I say primordium of the heart, it is an organ, or I can say the structure of tissue. Okay, it is the structure of tissue in early stages of development. In early stages of development, right? In the early stages of development. So, this is nothing but the group of mesodermal cells. I already told you the heart, it is developing in the mesoderm only. So, yes, it is a group of mesodermal cells. It is a group of mesodermal cells because it is a structure of tissue. Tissue is made up of cells, and which cells these are? These are mesodermal cells. Okay, mesodermal cells, and these mesodermal cells are called as these mesodermal cells are called as the angiogenetic cells, right? These are called as the angiogenetic cells. So, now these angiogenetic cells, if you just see this diagram clearly, these angiogenetic cells, they are actually in the cephalic part, or I can say the cranial part of the embryonic disc, and it is just in front of the buccopharyngeal membrane. So, remember, these angiogenic cells, these are in the cranial part, okay, cranial part, in front of the buccopharyngeal membrane, in front of the buccopharyngeal membrane, right? Whenever the folding of the head takes place, what will happen? What will happen whenever the folding will take place? Just see this particular diagram. What will happen? This cardiogenic area, it will come in front. Okay, it will become ventral in position. अगर folding होगी head की, तो what will happen? This cardiogenic area will come in front. Okay, so the heart primordium will become ventral in position. So remember, whenever head fold is formed, what it will lead to? The heart primordium will become ventral in position. The heart primordium, it becomes ventral in position. Now, let us just try to look this. What will happen? Now, let us suppose this is the embryonic plate. I am just trying to show this embryonic plate, right? Right. Now, let us suppose this is the embryonic plate, and over here we have the cloacal membrane. So, let us mark this as cloacal membrane. Okay, CM, the cloacal membrane. We have this buccopharyngeal membrane over here, right? And in the midline, you already know, we have this notochord, right? So, in front of this, we have a special group of cells, right? In front of this buccopharyngeal membrane, we have this special group of cells, and these special group of cells are called as the amniogenic cells, right? So, these special group of cells are called as the angiogenetic cells, right? Angiogenetic cells. This is the buccopharyngeal membrane, right? And over these angiogenetic cells, we have the primordium part, right? Repeating the last line. So, yes, last line cut kar denge. Okay? So, this is the angiogenic cells. Now, in this angiogenic cells, what will be happening? There will be formation of two endocardial heart tubes. So, these angiogenic cells will form the two endocardial heart tubes. Let us just write the second one, that is formation of two endocardial heart tubes. these angiogenetic cells, these angiogenetic cells, basically they will give rise to the two endocardial heart tubes. Okay, they will give rise to the endocardial heart tubes. Now let us understand, yes, what is happening over here. So you already know, let us suppose this is the, ectoderm and this is the endoderm. I'm just taking the cranial part over here, right? I'm just taking the cranial part over here, the cranial or the head part, right, towards the head. So you already know that, yes, this is the ectoderm, this is the endoderm, right, and in between we have this mesoderm, right, we have this mesoderm. So now what will happen? Yeah, just try to highlight this. Yes. So yes, you already know I'm just taking the cranial part over here, and what you will see over here that, yes, now what you will see over here that, let us suppose this area, okay, it is the septum transversum, right, it is the septum transversum, and this I have already told you, this is the undifferentiated lateral plate mesoderm, lateral plate mesoderm. Now this is the outermost part, it is the ectoderm, and the innermost part, it is the endoderm. Now there will be a formation of cavity over here, right, and this is called as the pericardial cavity. Okay, it is called as the pericardial cavity. So these are the mesodermal cells only, right, the angiogenetic cells. Okay, they will start secreting the secretions and there will be formation of this cavity over here, and this is called as the pericardial cavity, pericardial cavity, right. Now this area which is in between the pericardial cavity and the endoderm, so this mesoderm if I am talking about, so let me highlight this. So if I am specifically talking about this particular mesoderm, right, this will be called as the splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm. Why splanchnopluric? Splanchno means visceral, right? Splanchno means visceral. Visceral means towards the endoderm, जो अंदर की तरफ है. Okay, so this will be called as the splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm. Okay, we have the splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm, and in this splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm, what there will be formed? Two endocardial tubes will be formed, right? There will be two endocardial tubes that I am showing over here. So this is nothing but the endocardial tubes, right? These are nothing but the endocardial tubes that will be developing in the splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm. Now between the pericardial cavity and the ectoderm, so yes, this area which I am highlighting, right, this area which I am highlighting between the pericardial cavity and the ectoderm, so this mesoderm will be called as the somatopluric lateral plate mesoderm, right. Somato means towards the body wall, towards the ectoderm, so this will be called as the somatopluric lateral plate mesoderm, somatopluric lateral plate mesoderm. So yes, the heart tubes, they are developing in the splanchnopleural lateral plate mesoderm, okay, which will give rise to all the structures of the heart, most of the structures of the heart. That's why I told you the origin, it is splanchnic in origin, right? It is splanchnic in origin. So yeah, splanchnic mesodermal in origin, okay. So it is the lateral plate mesoderm only. So yes, and in between we have the pericardial cavity. Now remember, this splanchnopleural lateral plate mesoderm, it is the area where the cardiogenic area is there, okay. Specifically if we talk about, this is the cardiogenic area which is present, and it is in the splanchnopleural lateral plate mesoderm, okay. So in this area what you will get the developing heart tube, okay. You will get the developing heart tube, right? So this developing heart tube will give rise to heart. It will give rise to heart, right? It will give rise to the heart, okay. So yes, so there is an area which is in between, okay, in between the pericardial cavity and the heart tube, right? Now the somatopleuric lateral plate mesoderm, will give rise to the parietal layer of the serous pericardium, okay. It will give rise to the parietal layer of the serous pericardium. Now pericardium is the one which surrounds the heart, right? Pericardium, it is covering the heart. So pericardium has two layers, okay. We have the fibrous pericardium and serous pericardium. So you already know we have septum transversum. It will give rise to the fibrous pericardium. Okay, the outermost layer, okay, of the pericardium. And the serous pericardium, it is divided into parietal and visceral layer. So parietal layer will be coming from the somatopleuric lateral plate mesoderm. So let us just write it so that it's easy. So yes, let us assume we have this somatopleuric lateral plate mesoderm. Now what will happen? This somatopleuric lateral plate mesoderm will give rise to the parietal layer of serous pericardium, and the splanchnopleuric, okay. Now the splanchnopleuric lateral plate mesoderm it will give rise to two important structures, right? One, it is the cardiac jelly. And remember, in the cardiac jelly, like from the cardiac jelly, what is developing? We have the endocardial cushions. Or they are also called as the AV cushions, right? They are also called as the AV cushions. Why? Because they are present in between the atrium and the ventricles, okay. They are present in between the atrium and the ventricles. Whereas the other structure which will arise from the splanchnopleuric lateral plate mesoderm, it is the myoepicardial mantle. As the name suggests, myo means muscles, so they will give rise to the cardiac muscles, okay, and it will also give rise to the epicardium. It will also give rise to the epicardium. It is also called as the visceral layer of serous pericardium. serous pericardium. Now, as you already know that the heart, it is covered by pericardium. Let us just look at the normal structure also, so that it's way easy. Now suppose this is the heart, right? This is the heart, right? Now this heart, it is covered by pericardium. So outermost layer of the pericardium, it is called as the fibrous pericardium. Fibrous pericardium, right? And the inner layers of the pericardium, it is called as the serous pericardium. Now the serous pericardium, it is again divided into two parts. One is this, which is called as the parietal layer of serous pericardium. Serous pericardium. And one layer, it is this, that is called as the visceral layer of serous pericardium. Now, as you all can see that the visceral layer of the serous pericardium, it is tightly adherent to the heart wall. और heart की outermost structure क्या होती है? Epicardium. So it is impossible to differentiate between the two. So that's why it is like it is also called as the epicardium also. Heart की layers पता ना, epicardium, myocardium, endocardium. So this is the epicardium, which is tightly adherent to the visceral layer, or we just take it as one only. So this is called as the visceral layer. So you already know the fibrous pericardium will be coming from the septum transversum, right? The septum transversum, we have already know about this. This is an undifferentiated lateral plate mesoderm, right? Whereas, the parietal layer will come from the somatopleuric lateral plate mesoderm, and visceral layer will come from the splanchnopluric. And which part of the splanchnopluric? It is the myoepicardial mental, right? So yes, that was about the derivatives that we have seen. Now coming on to this heart tube. So yes, coming on to the heart tube. You already know we have the splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm. So let me just highlight this. Yes, let us suppose this is the, I'm taking this area out, okay. You already know we have the ectoderm, endoderm, in between we have the pericardial cavity, and below this we have this developing heart tubes. So I'm just taking this particular area out, and I will just try to show you how they will look like. So this area which I am highlighting, right? So this is the splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm, right? So this is the splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm. Splanchno means visceral towards the endoderm, right? So yes. So this is the splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm, okay. This is the lateral plate mesoderm, and this, in this you will find these two endocardial tubes, right, the heart tubes which are there. So let us just try to draw these heart tubes which are developing inside this splanchnopluric lateral plate mesoderm, right. So now these two heart tubes, right, these are called as endothelial heart tubes, right, or endocardial heart tubes. These are the endocardial heart tubes. Now, these two heart tubes will start fusing with each other, okay, they will start fusing with each other. So yes, this is, let us suppose this is the cranial end, okay, the head end, or this is the caudal end or the tail end, right. So this is the caudal or tail end, and this is the cranial or head end, right? Now what will happen? These two heart tubes will be fused at the cranial end. Okay, they will be fused at the cranial end, but towards the, yes, towards the caudal end, they are still not fused. Okay, they are still not fused. They start fusing from the top, go below, but they are not fused at the caudal end. So yes, this is the structure. So fusion will start from cranial to caudal part. Cranial part will be fused completely. Okay, cranial part will be fused completely, and this will be called as the arterial end. Okay, this will be called as the arterial end. Okay, it will form the arteries later on. So it is called as the arterial end, or it is also called as the truncus arteriosus. It is also called as the truncus arteriosus, right? And the lower end, okay, it is also called as the venous end. It is also called as the venous end. So it is also called as sinus venosus. It is also called as the sinus venosus. So we have the topmost part, the cranial part, that will form the arterial end, and the lowermost part that will form the venous end, right? That is the sinus venosus. So let us discuss the structure of the heart tube. Let us discuss the structure of the heart tube in detail. Now starting with the differentiation of the heart tube. Now this heart tube will be divided into 4 chambers. Okay, it will be divided into 4 chambers. It will be divided into 4 chambers. There will be 3 constrictions that will appear in the primitive heart tube. Okay, there will be 3 constrictions that will appear in the primitive heart tube, and it will lead to the development of 4 dilatations. Okay, 3 constrictions will be there. Let us just try to draw these 3 constrictions. Repeating the last line. Now, 3 constrictions will appear in the primitive heart tube, which will divide it into 4 dilatations. Okay, there will be 3 constrictions. So let us just try to draw this. There will be 3 constrictions. 1, yeah. The second constriction, and the third constriction, right? And at last we have this, yes, the sinus venosus. You already know this. This is the sinus venosus, which will give rise to the 2 horns, right? The right horn and the left horn. The right horn and the left horn. So let us suppose this is the right side and this is the left side. So yes, on the top we have the truncus arteriosus, right? We have the truncus arteriosus, right? So this part it is called as the bulbus cordis. Okay, truncus arteriosus, it is a part of this bulbus cordis. It is a part of this bulbus cordis. Then we have the primitive ventricle. Okay, we have this part that is called as the primitive ventricle, and we have another part over here that is called as the primitive atrium. Primitive atrium, and this is the sinus venosus. Okay, the sinus venosus, it is having 2 parts. We have the right horn of the sinus venosus, and we have the left part of sinus venosus. Right, sinus venosus. Now let us just discuss all the derivatives of this, of this heart tube. So remember over here that yes, the bulbous cordis, it is divided into three parts. Okay, it is divided into three parts. Yes, this part which I am highlighting, it is called as the proximal one-third part. Okay, it is called as the proximal one-third part of the bulbous cordis, and it will give rise to, okay, it will give rise to the rough inflowing part of the right ventricle. Okay, it will give rise to the rough inflowing part of right ventricle. Okay, so we have an outflowing part and the inflowing part. When I will discuss the heart anatomy, it will be like very much clear to you. So just as of now, remember the proximal one-third of the bulbous cordis will give the rough inflowing part of the right ventricle. Okay, apart from that, the area above it, okay, the area above it, it is also called as the conus part of the bulbous cordis. It is called as the conus part. Yes, this is the conus part, and this conus will give rise to the smooth outflowing part of both the ventricles. Okay, so it will give rise to smooth outflowing part of both the ventricles, and yes, above it we have another part that is called as the truncus arteriosus. Right, above it we have this part that is called as the truncus arteriosus. As the name only suggests, it will give rise to the ascending aorta. Okay, it will give rise to the ascending aorta along with the pulmonary trunk, So the primitive ventricle, okay, the primitive ventricle will give rise to, it will give rise to, remember, it will give rise to the rough inflowing part, of left ventricle. It will give rise to the rough inflowing part of the left ventricle. The primitive atrium, it will give rise to, okay, this whole structure will give rise to rough anterior wall of right atrium and left atrium, Okay, so remember the sinus venosus, this part, it is called as the median part of the sinus venosus. Okay, it is called as the median part of the sinus venosus, which I am like highlighting over here. This is the median part because it is just in the midline. So this is called as the median part of the sinus venosus, right? It is called as the median part of sinus venosus, and this median part of sinus venosus will give rise to the smooth posterior wall of right atrium, right? It will give rise to smooth posterior wall of right atrium and left atrium, right? Now, why smooth part of the right atrium? Because all the veins, see, venosus means veins, all the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, they all are draining into this atrium. So, right atrium only. So, these, the structure, the posterior wall will be smooth. The posterior wall will be smooth, right? So, that was regarding the differentiation of the heart tube. We have the right horn of the sinus venosus and the left horn, and the sinus venosus median part will be giving rise to the left and the right atrium, that is the smooth part. So, you already know, okay, if you just want me, so I'll just explain this particular structure. You know, we have the two major veins in our body. The two major veins, we have the superior vena cava, right, and we have this inferior vena cava. Inferior vena cava, right? So, they both will drain the blood into where? Right atrium. They both will drain the blood into the right atrium. The right atrium, it will open into, yes, you already know, we have the right ventricle, and from the right ventricle, what will arise? Pulmonary trunk, pulmonary trunk. So, just start from the end, beta. Start from the end. We have the right horn of the sinus venosus and the sinus venosus. So, sinus venosus are actually nothing but it is giving rise to these, all the veins, the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, right? So, they are developing from these sinus venosus, right? So, these sinus venosus will open into the posterior wall only of the right atrium. So, yeah, automatically these veins are draining blood into the atrium, right? Atrium. Later on, from the blood, the atrium se blood kahan ja raha hai? Ventricle pe. So, you can see the blood, it is going into the ventricle. So, the structure you can remember like this also. कि नीचे veins है, veins ने किसके अंदर drain किया? Atrium के अंदर. Then we have the ventricle, okay, and you already know on the left hand side we have this left atrium, okay, left ventricle, and from the left ventricle what is arising? The aorta. From the left ventricle what is arising? The aorta. So, yes, after primitive ventricle what is coming? That is this truncus arteriosus at the end, which is now giving rise to this aorta. So, yes, this was about the differentiation of the heart tube into the four chambers, right? Now, what will happen? There will be folding of the heart tube. What will happen? The sinus venosus will go behind and the atrium will come in front, okay? Now, this will give rise to the left and the right atrium, okay? The sinus venosus goes behind, so you are very much aware, if the sinus venosus, it is giving rise to the atrium, the right and the left atrium, so they are actually forming the posterior wall, right? And yeah, anteriorly, like if it is forming the posterior wall, what is happening? All the major veins, the superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, the pulmonary veins, they all are draining into this smooth posterior wall, right? So that's why like it explains that the all major veins, why they are draining into this, right? So let us just discuss about the folding of the heart tube, okay, the folding of the heart tube, right? So remember, initially there will be formation of a U-shaped heart tube, formation of U-shaped heart tube, U-shaped heart tube. What will happen? The heart tube, it will grow much faster than the pericardium, so it becomes folded to form a U-shaped tube. So you already know the part, the bulbus cordis will come in front, right? The bulbus cordis will come in front, okay? The ventricle part, the primitive ventricle will be down. So this is, let us suppose this is the bulbus cordis, this is the primitive ventricle, okay? I'm just writing ventricle over here. Then we have the atrium part, okay? We have the atrium part which is going behind, okay? And this atrium, it is, we have the sinus venosus, which is, yes, we have the sinus venosus, and this sinus venosus is having two horns, right? We have these two horns of the sinus venosus. So, yes, this is somewhat the structure will look like. This is somewhat the structure will look like. So, we have, it is called as the U-shaped heart tube, okay? So, yeah, this is a U-shaped heart tube. Later on, what will happen to this U-shaped heart tube? It will convert into the S-shaped heart tube. So there will be formation of S-shaped heart tube. S-shaped heart tube. Now what will happen as a result of the rapid growth of this cardiac loop? Okay, what will happen? It becomes S-shaped. Now the bulbus cordis, okay, the bulbus cordis will lie in front. Let us suppose this is the bulbus cordis, right? This is the bulbus cordis. It will lie in front. Then we have this primitive ventricle, okay, the primitive ventricle. Okay, I'm just trying to show the side view first, how it will look from the side. Okay, this atrium and sinus venosus will be completely shifted to the back. It will be completely shifted to the back. Okay, so this primitive ventricle, okay, from here you already know we have this primitive atrium. Okay, ये primitive ventricle है, primitive atrium है. We have this primitive atrium, and this primitive atrium, it is actually opening into this. Yeah, the sinus venosus is there containing the two horns, that is the left and the right horns of the sinus venosus. So it is the side view, आप side से देख रहे हो. But if you just see the sinus venosus, basically it will lie behind the primitive atrium. ये atrium से भी पीछे है. So that explains the reason why all the major veins, the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, they all open into the posterior wall, right? So it is like posteriorly. If we just see from the front, if we just see from the front view, okay, if we just see from the front, what I will get? I will get this bulbus cordis, right? I will only get this bulbus cordis, and I will be able to see this, ventricles, right? I will be able to see these ventricles. And at the sides, what will happen? Just behind we have this atrium. Behind we have this atrium, okay? The primitive atrium. The primitive atrium, the primitive ventricle. So you just have to know this is the bulbus cordis. Bulbus cordis. PV stands for the primitive ventricle. Primitive ventricle. PA, primitive atrium. And we have the sinus venosus, right? Sinus venosus. Okay, so that was about the formation of U and S-shaped heart tube. That's why the ventricles are in front and atriums are at the back, right? And all the major veins, as you can see, the sinus venosus, वो तो atrium के भी पीछे है. So all the major veins, the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, they are all behind it. So that is how the structure goes on. So that was about the heart tube, okay, the development of the heart, the cardiogenic area, the somatopleuric, lateral plate mesoderm, the splanchnopleurotic, what structures they are giving rise to. Transverse, septum transversum, only one structure of the heart that you have to remember, that is the fibrous pericardium. Whereas septum transversum, it will also give rise to the liver. I have already discussed in the GIT embryology, it will give rise to the liver. It will also give rise to the central tendon of the diaphragm. Okay, it will also give rise to the central tendon of the diaphragm. So yes, that is again you have to remember. Apart from that, we have discussed the heart tubes. They are developing in the splanchnopleurotic lateral plate mesoderm. Okay, and yes. What are the structures coming from the splanchnopleurotic? The cardiac jelly and the myoepicardial mantle. And yes, we have the cardiac muscles, that is the myocardium, which will be formed. The epicardium, which will be formed from there, right? And the cardiac jelly will give rise to the endocardial cushions. Later, I have discussed the heart tube. The cranial end fuses, but the caudal end, it doesn't fuse. The caudal end, it is the venous end called as the sinus venosus. The proximal end, it is called as the arterial end or the truncus arteriosus, and all the parts that are arising from the different parts, right? So that was about and how the folding takes place, the formation of U and S-shaped heart tube. Thank you.